Under the Knife 2 released back in 2008, the game was met with mixed reviews, or more accurately, the reception for this game was kinda sporadic. While a lot of the praise went to the improved gameplay, its interesting story, and overall improvement in the presentation department, there were a few things that were contentious. Some felt as if there should have been more unique content, while some felt like they should have added some sort of multiplayer feature to it. And when it came to the story, it was split between being really good or being too safe. But if there's one thing that rang clear in almost every review I've read, it was the fact that things in this series as a whole were starting to feel stagnant. Hell, one review I read pondered why this game even needed to exist, which was pretty harsh, Jesus Christ. Though despite the topic of today's game being in pre-production around the time Under the Knife 2 was released, the game's director Daisuke Kanata more than likely felt the same. But not to the degree of that reviewer, because whatever he said, I don't know who pissed in his cereal or what, that was very uncalled for. But more specifically, he and the team involved with this game was trying to make something different, something that would end up becoming the most ambitious game in the franchise. And on May 18, 2010, US audiences would be introduced to Trauma Team.
Vitals dropping! Are we there yet?
Whoa, come on, get out of the way!
Come on. He's not gonna make it if we don't hurry.
Doesn't look good.
Needs an operation, now. Just hang in there a little longer. Are we ready?
Out of the way! Gurney coming through!
There's still time. We can still be saved. Can you do it, Doc? Yeah. Save life.
To say that this game was a major shakeup to the franchise would be an overstatement. While still played like a trauma-centered game, we now had more of a variety of things to do on top of the standard surgeries we were used to. And that variety was connected to different medical fields like first response, orthopedics, endoscopy, diagnostics, and medical forensics. And after reading through a good chunk of interviews about the development of this game, just so I could kind of get like into the developer's headspace a bit, you can definitely feel the ambition of what these guys were trying to do. And it's helped by the fact that Daisuke Kanata himself described this game as a conglomeration of the Trauma Center series. It was also one where, again, they really wanted to do something different, and it was very clear from the trailers to the actual gameplay. No more eldritch diseases or skills from ancient gods. Trauma Team was going for a more realistic and down-to-earth vibe. And if I had to compare this game's story to anything, it's kind of on the same scale, something like Grey's Anatomy or Chicago Med House, maybe? I don't know. You know what? Speaking of Grey's Anatomy, a fun fact for you guys. At one point, Trauma Team was going to have its own live-action show. Yes, you heard me correctly. This game was going to have its own show. And actually, let's talk about it for a bit before we move on, because when I was initially recording for this video, I came across something that was very interesting, and I just had to share it. But if you really don't care too much about the live action show and you just kind of want to get a move on for the rest of the review, then I'll leave a timestamp right here so that you guys can skip to the story section. But I'll give y'all a minute just so you know you can make your decision and whatever. So yeah. All right, we good? Ready? Great! Oh God, I am going to regret this. A month before the release of Trauma Team, it was announced that the game was going to get a live-action show. It would end up being produced by Instavision, with Atlus and Indigo acting as co-producers, and according to The Hollywood Reporter, the plot would center around a group of last-year residents at a rough LA hospital who would form a group of life-saving vigilantes at an underground treatment facility. There is so much wrong with that description, but it only gets worse from here. From what I was able to find, the pilot for the show was in post-production when the article was released, but other than that, it was radio silence for years. The only thing that came from it was a trailer back in 2013 from Fat Dragon Films. However, in 2016, the pilot would be leaked on YouTube, and while it was mostly unfinished, they God this abomination never got released, because there was nothing, and I mean nothing good or redeemable about this pilot, and that's saying a lot coming from me. And another fun fact for you guys, I always try to see the good in the piece of media, no matter how good, bad, or just meh it is. And this applies to all forms of media, by the way. For example, TMC Devil May Cry. This is certainly not the best game ever made, but I really love the way they designed Dante in it. His fit was everything that 12-year-old me wanted and more. I'm not gonna lie to you, I might get crucified for this, but with the exception of Secret Invasion and Quantumania, I've enjoyed the recent MCU films and TV shows that have released. I haven't watched all the shows yet, but they look fine to me, barring She-Hulk CGI. And you know, by the way, hey Disney, pay your workers! Now, the best way I can describe this pilot is that it's like the combination of every generic medical drama you can think of. But to make it stand out, they made sure to fill it with so much melodrama, you would think you were watching an episode of The Young and the Restless or the CW version of 90210. But you wanna know how the producers described the Trauma Team show? They described it as Grey's Anatomy meets A-Team.
Nigga, what?
I'll give them one thing, they were bold, but that is the most disrespectful comparison I have ever heard in my life. I've seen a few episodes of A-Team, and while I've never watched Grey's Anatomy before, I can tell you for a fact that it is far better than whatever the fuck this was. I bet you when they were trying to sell this pilot off, every executive looked at it and said, absolutely not, go fuck yourself. This shit was so bad, I made an executive decision that after I'm done making this video and watching High Score Girl, I'm gonna go watch Grey's Anatomy to watch out whatever the hell I just watched. Though despite how much the show sucks, I can't help but feel bad for those involved in making it. The crazy thing about this though is that I've barely been able to find anything else about the people involved besides the actors involved and the CEO of Instavision, Joshua Long. The actor seems to be doing fine. The only one I possibly know of is Eden Regal, who was the English voice actor for May in Guilty Gear Strive. But, what did Joshua Long do? Because, you know, he has an IMDb, he got a couple stuff here and, oh. That probably explains a lot. Now, if you want to watch this pilot for yourself, I will have it linked in the description below. But be warned, you will lose 20 minutes of your life if you decide to watch this pilot, and those 20 minutes are never coming back. So, proceed with caution. And with that travesty of a pilot out of the way, it's time that we cover Trauma Team's story. And like always, I will be putting timestamps down below so you guys can avoid spoilers. And boy oh boy, this is going to be an interesting one. In Trauma Team, you're not just playing as one character, hell, not even two. You're going to be playing as 6 characters throughout the entire game. Luckily though, you can play as each character separately, as their stories are more about them as doctors, their past, their motivations, and the challenges they face. Some are a little more straightforward to talk about, while some are a little harder because of how nuanced they can be. And on that note, I'm going to be saving most of my thoughts on all 6 characters because we got some stuff to go through. It's a lot. And let's kick things off by talking about our first character, CRS-01. Damn, that is kind of a mouthful. Yeah, you know what? Never mind. I'm just gonna say CRS, just yeah. CRS is one of the more mysterious characters in the game as he suffers from amnesia. The only thing he remembers is that he was once a surgeon, but for reasons unknown, he's currently in jail serving a 250-year sentence. Jesus Christ! What the hell did he do to get that long of a sentence? Did he go on a mass murder spree? Was he a terrorist? God damn. However, when the events of the game begins, he is given the opportunity of a lifetime by the FBI to take time off his sentence in exchange for performing a series of otherwise difficult operations. CRS agrees, and throughout his storyline, we see him save the lives of countless patients at Resurgam First Care. And there, he works with some of the other characters we get to play as, being Maria, Hank, Tomoe, and Gabriel. Though after completing one of his operations, it's revealed that the reason he's in jail is for a bioterrorist attack that happened at the Cumberland College 8 years prior to the events of the game. And when this event gets revealed to the others and Maria presses CRS about it, it would end up breaking him. Not only is he forced to relive something he has no memories of, but it also makes him question whether or not he's actually responsible for the attack. But thanks to the help of the doctors we've met, as well as Agent Holden, CRS slowly begins to learn that life moves on, and instead of dwelling in his mistakes from the past, he should move forward with his dreams of saving lives. Next is Maria Torres, who thankfully is pretty straightforward in what she goes through. Maria is a loud and abrasive woman who's passionate about her job and has the desire of wanting to be a hero. However, Maria is independent to the point in which she often works by herself as she feels that she could do her job without the help of others, something that will later come back to bite her in the ass. And the story does this by putting her through situations that become more and more difficult, from dealing with burn victims to eventually dealing with a whole ass bus accident in a mall. Real quick, right? I know that there are documented cases of bus accidents happening, you know, this game's going for realism, all that other stuff. But can we just talk about the fact that this bus went through a goddamn mall, and specifically the second floor of a mall, not the first floor, the second floor. That right there seems very, very far-fetched. Actually, no. The more I think about it, right, with the way people have been driving these last few years, that seems very possible now. Despite struggling to keep up with the amount of victims, she will later get assistance from the other first care responders coming from Resurgam, and after this event she comes to the realization that if she wants to be a hero, she's gonna have to rely on others, which she will later take to heart. Kinda. Next is Hank Freebird, and god damn he's a unit! Hank is a calm and down-to-earth doctor who simply wants to save lives. Not only does he do it as an orthopedic surgeon, he also does it as a vigilante known as Captain Eagle. And this desire of his to save lives comes from his past as a soldier who was suffering from PTSD, which you can assume is from him not only taking the lives of others, but also his own failure in saving the life of one of his comrades. He eventually meets and starts caring for a young woman named Claire who attempted to take her own life, and during this he tries to show her why life is worth living. However, as the story continues, he ponders whether or not he should continue being Captain Eagle, as instead of being seen as someone saving lives, he's instead being painted by the media as a villain. And after attempting to save people during an accident was met with disdain by the locals, he hangs up the suit feeling as if he's doing more harm than good. But things get even worse when during a trip to the mall, Claire is shot by a madman and simply dies in Hank's arms. So despite being in utter despair after what happened and getting shot multiple times, he goes to save the man that shot Claire. And after completing the surgery, he later learns that she's actually okay and would eventually grow the confidence to become Captain Eagle again. Next is Tomoe Tachibana, a noble and gentle woman who's a part of the Tachibana clan. Her story involves her wanting to prove something of herself instead of following the traditions of her clan. And even though she's able to make something for herself, being a specialist when it comes to endoscopic surgeries, she eventually learns that her father is ill, and abiding by her sense of honor, she heads back to Japan in order to heed her father and the clan's overall wishes. However, when the director of Resurgam and Gabriel shows up to convince Tomoe to come back, alongside her father's condition getting worse, she goes to save him and later becomes even more determined to follow her own path. There's also that little bus accident from earlier that reinforces this, but for real, how the fuck did this happen? Next is Gabriel Cunningham, who beforehand sort of played the role as this cool doctor and something of a comic relief for the cast. However, in the short amount of time we spend with him, he's actually less comedic and more cynical. Compared to the others, his story is more tragic, focusing on the struggles of being a diagnostician as well as everything going on in his life, from his wife filing for divorce to feeling that he is a failure of a father due to working so much and not seeing his son. But when he eventually has to diagnose him with Werner syndrome on top of struggling to even operate on him, Gabriel will end up making the decision to leave Resurgam. Finally is Naomi Kirishima, a returning character from Second Opinion. Hold up, I thought he was a surgeon, why is he doing forensics?
Miss Kimishima, your test results have come back.
I see. Let me ask you up front. How long do I have until my flame goes out?
A year at best. Maybe 6 months.
Oh. Well, shit. Her story is about her processing her eventual death through her work. With the help of Naval, her former partner during events of Second Opinion, they work to find the cause of death for victims that have been murdered. And with each investigation, Naomi sees just how cruel and tragic death can be, with one victim essentially dying in agonizing pain as her parents did little to nothing to attempt to save her, and another that is killed because of her delusions. But it isn't all bad, as throughout her story, she meets a young girl named Alyssa, who I can only describe as being the light in Naomi's otherwise dark world. However, during an investigation on a serial bomber, the one responsible, known simply as the Raging Bomber, gives Naomi a package with a bomb in it, with Alyssa being caught up in the explosion. And wanting to get her get back, Naomi manages to track down the Raging Bomber. But just as she's about to arrest her, the Raging Bomber suddenly goes on a rampage, mentioning something about Rosalia, and before long, she starts to
God damn!
Naomi's story ends with her finding new meaning to keep going in life by taking care of Alyssa. With that, we're almost done with the story. I know it's a lot, but don't worry, the last chapter is a little more focused and quick to boot. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the characters real quick. In my opinion, compared to the other games in the franchise, Trauma Team easily has the best cast of characters. They each have stories and motivations that feel very grounded and even relatable in some parts. But despite CRS's story being something that I have never gone through before, I can relate to the theme of not dwelling on the past and moving towards the future. Or we could talk about Gabriel and just how cynical he is of people, which honestly makes sense because this man had to deal with a politician who was an absolute hard ass. And going through his story made me happy that I didn't pursue being the doctor, because god, that would have been horrible. And with how down to earth and relatable it is, it's a great thing that we were able to focus on each of them individually. But as good as they are, some of them aren't exactly perfect. Most of the issues more or less relates to his pacing. Some are pretty decent, while some kind of feel like you're moving through cement. But the one issue I had the most with was with Hank. Now, there's nothing wrong with Hank as a character. Personally, he's one of my favorites next to Maria and Naomi. But I'm not gonna lie to you, I had zero clue what this man's story was supposed to be about. A part of it feels like it was something relating to justice or just a general idea of life. Though I had to take some time trying to understand it. Was basically meant going through the footage 500 million times. I was able to understand it. Somewhat. Oh boy. Now, before we continue on, there's one last thing I want to talk about, that being the voice actors. Trauma Team is the second game in this franchise with full voice acting, and it has improved significantly. Compared to New Blood, everyone's performance is consistent and doesn't feel like they don't want to be there.
There's an important point you're missing.
Huh?
There's a limit to what even a hero can do by himself. A hero acting on his own only acts in vain.
Hey, Hank! What's the matter? You leaving?
Yeah, I'm going back to my room.
Another thing about Trauma Team is that this game has a lot of well-known voice actors like Stephanie Shea, Amanda Wynn Lee, Kristen Potter, Travis Willingham, the late Jonathan Joss, and finally, Nolan North. To say the cast is stacked would be an overstatement, but let's move on to the topic at hand, the 7th and final chapter of Trauma Team. But before we do that, we are going to need a little bit of context first. Throughout each of the characters' stories, they've each had their own run-in with black bruises popping up out of nowhere, and it isn't until Naomi's story where we see them pop up more and more with each victim she examines. There's even this weird ghostly girl we saw at the beginning of the game that appears before Maria with some cryptic-ass message. But after finishing everyone's story, we begin to learn that those black bruises are a symptom of a virus known as Rosalia. This virus is a nasty motherfucker that can't be detected when someone is infected, and by the time you try to do something, it's probably too late, as you'll eventually go crazy, which explains the bus incident. Then you will bleed out of every orifice in your goddamn body. Safe to say that this virus is ultra deadly. So, to avoid a further outbreak, the city ends up being quarantined by the US Army. Throughout this chapter, we spend time learning how Rosalia works, as well as learning the truth behind the creation of Rosalia and the events that caused CRS to be in jail. Though luckily I've already explained how Rosalia works, so let's just go through everything else. Early on, we learned that CRS wasn't the one responsible for the terrorist attack 8 years ago. Instead, it was his teacher and parental figure, Albert Sartre, who was responsible for his creation. Similar to Marcus from New Blood, Rosalia was created not for malicious intent, but as a way to further protect the human body from disease. However, the virus did the opposite. It would attack every cell in the body, and due to the accidental breakout of the virus, Albert would eventually escape, leaving CRS as the one allegedly responsible. Later in the story, we see Naomi and Maria head to Mexico to find Albert Sartre's adopted daughter, Rosalia Rossellini, who would later be the key to curing the virus. But just as things are slowing down and the virus is being treated, Naomi collapses in pain. It's revealed that not only was she infected with Rosalia, the virus also merged with the condition that she was suffering from, turning it into Twisted Rosalia. And thanks to CRS's skills and a little help from a certain somebody, CRS is able to destroy the infection as well as getting rid of Naomi's condition. With the Rosalia virus eradicated, things finally go back to normal and we get to see what everyone is up to. CRS is still in jail, but might have gotten something that will eventually lead to him being a free man. Maria, despite knowing she needs to work with others to achieve her dream, is still fighting with other paramedics. Hank is still saving lives as Captain Eagle while also caring for Claire, and Gabe is his usual self. But with Naomi now cured of her condition and given all the time in the world to live, she thanks everyone while holding Alyssa. And that is a wrap on Trauma Team, everybody. I'm sorry this section was a long one, but there is a good amount of stuff that goes on with these characters. I didn't even mention the small story bits you get for being in the game, or the more comedic moments. Like in Hank's first episode, right, this man shows up and scares the hell out of the robber, and he later punches the ceiling and gives the owner spare change in order to fix it. That right there is funny, and I can only imagine the owner being like, bitch, bring your ass back here. That ain't gonna be enough to fix my ceiling, you big body bastard. In general, it's a lot, and while I've already shared what I liked and disliked about this story, I did find myself liking it a lot more than I originally thought I would. And now it's time to talk about the gameplay, and this one, it's a beefy one. Like I mentioned earlier, Trauma Center was created with the goal of making something that was a conglomeration of the franchise, and they did this by giving us 6 different play styles. Luckily, until you start playing as Gabriel and Naomi, the gameplay is largely the same as it was in past games, except for one very noticeable difference. The time limits are finally gone. There is a god after all. With the exception of a few levels, you don't have to worry about trying to do things quickly, and instead you can take as much time as needed to finish the level. Of course, you still have to worry about the vitals, but luckily it only applies to CRS, Maria, and Tomoe. And unlike past games where vitals can drop quickly, the vitals in Trauma Team drops at a pretty decent pace unless you're playing on the harder difficulty. Now when it comes to each character's gameplay, they each focus on something different relating to their respective medical fields. And while most of what you're going to be dealing with is similar to what we've gone through before, each field does have something unique to set itself apart. The first is CRS, who focuses on surgery, which is modeled after what we went through in past games. And to be honest, there's really nothing to say. With the time limits gone, it definitely makes these sections less difficult. There's still a bit of tension when you have to deal with the patient's vitals though, but beyond that, nothing really has changed. Next is Maria, who focuses on first response, which requires you to stabilize multiple patients who are suffering from various injuries. For the most part, this one isn't too different from surgeries, except that you're not cutting open the patient to treat them. Instead, you're dealing with surface level things like lacerations, fractured limbs, and burns. Sometimes you might have to perform CPR and put a tube through a patient's throat, but other than that, it's a more simplified form of surgery. But then there's the fact that you have to worry about dealing with multiple patients, especially since they can die. And if you reach that limit on how many patients can die, then it's game over. So, I hope y'all are good with multitasking, because if not, yeah, you're gonna hate these levels. Next is Hank, who focuses on orthopedics, which requires you to be both precise and strong. And compared to the last two, these levels are when the Wii's motion controls really start to kick in. Because of how precise you need to be, you're gonna be bound by a guide which shows up for everything, like cutting open the patient, drilling into some bone, and so on and so forth. And while you have some leeway within the guide, going outside of it will give you a penalty. Even though you have 5 hearts, with the penalties cutting them in half, they can rack up if you're not being careful. Now originally, I didn't really like these sections too much because of how precise you had to be, and with how jank the motion controls are for the Wii, it made doing some things annoying as hell. Despite that though, it has grown on me, especially since by the time I got to the final chapter, I was used to it by then. But the same can't be said for Tomoe's levels. Speaking of which, there's Tomoe, who focuses on endoscopy and is the last of the surgical operations. These levels require you to go through otherwise hard to reach areas to treat whatever is there. And compared to the last 3 playstyles, there is nothing I like about this one. Most of it comes from its controls, because moving through areas requires you to thrust the Wii remote forward like you're stabbing somebody. And this wouldn't be so bad if these levels weren't claustrophobic as hell. There's also the fact that some of these levels will require you to go through multiple pathways to get to that area that needs to be treated. Granted, you can press down on the D-pad to retract yourself, but it's not enough to make these levels enjoyable. Alongside the jank as hell movement, selecting the tools you want to use feels just as janky and annoying. The worst tool out of all the ones you can use is the hemostatic forceps, as you don't really have an indicator to show how long you should use it for, and the other is the scalpel, which is weird because it works just like how it does at CRS's levels, but it feels as if moving it is bound to the camera's position. I don't know. All I know is that this shit is the epitome of jank. Next is Gabriel, who focuses on diagnostics and is one out of the 2 visual novel sections of the game. Gabriel's levels focus on going through a series of interviews and examinations to deduce what condition the patient has. While these levels don't really have a set difficulty, these bitches can be both hard and long. I probably should have written that better. Every level has you interviewing the patient, examining them, cross-referencing their x-rays and other scans, and finally putting all the pieces together to provide a diagnosis. Even though you're mainly going to be gathering info and comparing charts though, doing these things can add up, making these sections a lot longer than expected. And it's even worse considering the fact that some levels will have you go through all of this 2 to 3 more times. Never mind the fact that it'll also require you to get the patient to open up to you about what's going on. And let me say this now, this is the most annoying shit to go through, and again, I'm happy that I didn't pursue this profession. So, with everything you have to go through, I strongly recommend keeping a guide near you so you won't go crazy trying to figure out what to do next. And this also applies to our final character, Naomi. Naomi focuses on medical forensics, which requires you to study the corpse and collect evidence to piece together how the victim died. And just like with Gabriel, you're gonna need a guide for it. While Naomi's levels aren't as bloated and are pretty straightforward, there are things that can trip you up and either make you get a game over or get lost trying to figure out what to do next. As for what she has to go through, it isn't too bad, as each level has you examining the victim's body as well as their personal effects, i.e. their clothes and whatever else they had on them, listen to testimony to find the statement that sticks out the most, find evidence at the scene of the crime and anywhere else you're allowed to go, and finally piece cards together to be used towards the end of the level to piece together the events of the crime. In a way, it's kind of similar to Ace Attorney or Danganronpa. God damn it, that's the second time I'm mentioning up this series. Am I gonna have to review Danganronpa now? Oh god.
Damn!
While on paper it doesn't really seem like a lot, in practice all of this could lead to these sections being even longer than what you were going through with Gabriel. Hell, maybe even more considering the fact that finding evidence can be a pain in the ass to go through. It's like taking glasses from someone who can't see worth a damn and forcing them to go look for something. Then there's the part where you have to piece the cards together, as doing so will lead to a quiz. Now, that isn't the issue. The issue is when you have to answer some of these questions that feel like something that you would otherwise wouldn't know unless you were interested in forensics. One example I can easily think of is that in the first level, there's a question about what's weird with the victim's wrist. Now, when I did it, I thought it had something to do with how the wound wasn't deep enough or something, but that ended up being wrong, and the answer was that there weren't any pain reaction wounds, something that I had zero clue would be a thing to be looking out for. And questions like these pop up constantly, which could lead to a couple of game overs. By the way though, this and Gabriel's levels will give you the opportunity to save your progress at any time. I'm saying this to say that if you don't save your progress, you're gonna have to do everything from the beginning. And with the way these levels are, I guarantee y'all that you're probably gonna lose y'all shit. I will admit, trying to find the words to end this video off took me way more time than I would like to admit, but to try to keep things brief because I have a lot that I want to say about this game. Despite me not liking Tomoe, Gabriel, or Naomi's levels in this game, Trauma Team might very well be the best game in the franchise. The grounded nature of the story and the way we followed these characters was not only interesting, but also really effective in us caring about them. Of course, the gameplay is hit or miss, which I honestly just contribute to the Wii being, well, the Wii. But otherwise, I enjoyed playing through this game and was especially happy that the time limit was mostly removed. If this game ever gets a remaster, I would hope for it to improve on the levels that weren't so great. However, the better question to ask overall is, will this franchise ever come back? Mind you, it's been over 15 years since the release of this game, and since then, it felt like Atlus has slowly but steadily forgotten about this franchise, which sucks because it's one of the most unique ones they've had, barring the other Megaten spin-offs in Etri and Odyssey. But who knows, Atlus has been getting more and more popular since the 2010s, and with their recent success with Metaphor, I would love for them to at least give us a remaster of some kind. Hell, I might even start a campaign for that to happen. It's what I would say if I was a little more confident.
Oh, hell no!
I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I am not built like the people who did the free Marvel vs. Capcom 2 campaign. Like, I'm already an awkward person as is, and I overthink way too much to do something like that. But I'll figure something out. Maybe. Possibly. Now, for those who are interested in playing all of these games, you're in luck, as most of these games are fairly inexpensive. If you were to get the first 3 games complete in box, they range between being 10 to 25 bucks. As for the last 2 games, those might be more on the pricey side, as you're going to be spending up to 60 bucks for them. But at least those 60 bucks will give you a good ass time, unlike Call of Duty or any of these other AAA games. Yeah. With that, thank you guys so much for watching till the end of the video. I already mentioned this in the last video, but this and Under the Knife 2 were supposed to be together in one big video, but this project ended up being bigger than what I was expecting, and it didn't make it any better when I found out about the Trauma Team pilot, because oh my god, I had to talk about that monstrosity. But as sad as I am to have finally finished this franchise, it was fun going through these games again, either for the first time or for my 7th and 8th playthrough. Excessive, I know, but I really love these games a lot, and I really hope that with these reviews, it ends up pushing some of you guys to try out the franchise for yourself. Originally, the plan was to cover Okami first, which has been a game that I've been wanting to play for a while now, and it's fitting ever since we got confirmation of Okami 2. That was until it was announced in April that Raito Kuzunoha vs. the Soulless Army was getting a remaster, and originally I was going to be like, okay, we're going to cover Okami, and then we'll probably cover Raito sometime later, but due to the stars aligning and finally getting a gram of good luck somehow, Raito is going to be the next game that I'm going to be reviewing. But don't worry, we're still covering Okami. After the Ace Attorney retrospect, I am this close to finishing the Trials and Tribulations script. Just give me a little bit more time. But while I'm going to Raito, I'm going to be working on another video focusing on fighting games. I won't say much, but at the time of me recording this video, I've been recording gameplay and writing the script simultaneously, and I'm hoping that I can get it out by July or early August at the latest. Like always, make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the little bell notification so you guys know when the next video is going to be coming out, and make sure to stay safe, hydrate, and stay cool out there, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!